On the frozen fringe of the Andromeda Reach, where stars blinked like distant campfires and snow never melted, only compacted into ice older than human civilization, there stood a lonely watchpost known only as Outpost Theta 9. It was less a station and more a steel blister clinging to the surface of Krylos, a planet wrapped in eternal winter, its skies the color of bruised twilight and its winds sharp enough to carve names into bone. Inside that frigid shell, Corporal Joran Vex stirred lukewarm nutrient broth with a bent spoon, his breath curling into mist before vanishing against the frosted viewport. Human military presence here was nominal, a symbolic gesture more than a strategic one. Peace treaties with the Krillian Concord had held for a decade, and most soldiers rotated out after 6 months, grateful to escape the endless chill. But not Joran. He'd volunteered for a second tour and then a third, not out of duty, but because somewhere in this ice-buried silence, he'd found a peace he couldn't name. That peace shattered one blustery dusk when the outer airlock groaned open without authorization. Joran nearly choked on his broth. Protocol dictated immediate lockdown and weapon readiness, but curiosity, not caution, drove him to the entrance hatch. What he found curled against the inner wall was no threat. It was a child, barefoot, clad in a tattered, iridescent tunic that shimmered like oil on snow, her skin the deep green of glacier moss, her hair a wild spill of bone-white strands tangled with ice crystals. She couldn't have been more than 8 by human reckoning, though Krillian children matured differently. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and the golden hue of molten amber, stared up at him without fear, only exhaustion. In one trembling hand, she clutched a small pendant shaped like a spiral galaxy. "Human," she said, voice thin but clear. "You live here alone?" Joran blinked. Yeah, just me." He knelt, careful not to loom. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then shivered violently. Without thinking, he scooped her up, light as a sparrow, and carried her to the thermal cot near the heater coil. He wrapped her in surplus thermal blankets, brewed her a cup of sweet synth milk, and watched as she devoured it like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Her name, she told him between sips, was Leary. She came from the High Hollows, a network of geothermal cities buried deep beneath Krylos's ice sheets. Her mother, a scientist, she said, had been arrested by the Ice Ward Enclave for heresy. When Joran asked what that meant, Leary's eyes hardened. "They said she loves a human," she whispered. Silence stretched. Joran shifted awkwardly. "Oh." Leary studied him, then set down her cup. "You're the human she loves." Joran nearly dropped his spoon again. "What?" "My mom talks about you when the ice sings. She says you fixed the resonance coil in the old treaty wing and didn't ask for anything. She says you have sad eyes but a warm voice." She leaned forward, suddenly earnest. "She cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Joran's chest tightened. He remembered her, Silva, a Krillian xenobiologist who'd come to Theta 9 on official business 2 years ago during the last Joint Tech Summit. They'd spent only 3 days together, troubleshooting a faulty atmospheric scanner, sharing rations, laughing over Earth idioms she didn't understand. It hadn't been romance, just kindness and connection in a place where both were rare. He'd assumed she'd returned to her people and forgotten him, but she hadn't. Now her daughter sat in his outpost, eyes wide with hope, and said the one thing that made the frozen world lurch beneath his boots. "Marry my mom, human." Joran stared. Then, helplessly, he laughed. It wasn't mean-spirited, just disbelief, the kind that bursts from your mouth when reality tilts too fast. "Leary, I can't just marry someone, especially not across species, governments, and a whole planet of snow." Leary's face crumpled. Not slowly, not with sniffles. It was like watching ice crack under pressure. Sudden, violent, and heartbreaking. Her shoulders shook, silent sobs racking her small frame. The pendant slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. "I tried," she whispered. "I walked 3 days through the shatter drifts. I dodged Ice WYRMS and Frost Scouts. My toes went numb and I kept going because if you say yes, they can't take her away. The Enclave law says a bonded pair can't be separated if one is of allied species." Joran's laughter died like a snuffed candle. He looked at her, really looked, at the frostbitten heels, the chapped lips, the way her green fingers trembled not from cold but from fear. This wasn't a child playing matchmaker. This was a desperate plea wrapped in innocence. He picked up the pendant and knelt before her. "Leary, I didn't mean to laugh at you. I was just surprised." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You think it's silly, a human and a Krillian." "No," he said softly. I think it's brave. She blinked. You do. I do. He hesitated, then added, and your mom, Silva. She's incredible. Smart. Kind. She once explained starlight to me like it was music. Leary's eyes flickered with hope. Then, Joran exhaled. The outpost heater hummed. Outside, the wind howled like a morning spirit. Okay, he said. Leary froze. Okay what? Okay, I'll do it. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then, slowly, a smile bloomed. Wide, luminous, and utterly radiant. You mean it. I mean it. She leapt into his arms, hugging him so tightly he nearly toppled backward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But Joran's relief was short-lived, because within minutes, the outpost's perimeter alarms shrieked. Red lights spun. Frost sensors blared. On the surveillance feed, 3 sleek, obsidian skiffs cut through the blizzard, their hulls etched with the sigil of the Ice-Ward Enclave. 3 blades crossed over a frozen eye. They found me, Leary whispered, clinging to his sleeve. Joran's mind raced. Theta 9 had no weapons beyond a stun pistol and an emergency flare. The Enclave operated under martial law. If they took Leary and him, they'd vanish into the ice prisons, never to be seen again. We're not staying, he said, grabbing his cold weather pack. We're leaving. Now. But the storm. Better than cages. He shoved rations, thermal wraps, and his only personal possession, a battered harmonica, into the pack. Then he slung it over his shoulder, grabbed Leary's hand, and triggered the emergency tunnel beneath the outpost, a relic from the old war days. The hatch groaned open, revealing a narrow shaft plunging into darkness. Hold your breath, he warned. They dropped. The fall was brief but brutal. They landed in a snow-choked maintenance channel, half-buried but passable. Above, the outpost shook as Enclave forces breached the airlock. Joran pulled Leary deeper into the tunnel, their boots crunching on ancient ice. Where are we going? She asked, breathless. To the old treaty wing, he said. Your mom's lab is there. If she's still free, we find her. If she's already captured, we break her out. Leary's eyes widened. But that's 50 clicks through the hollow wastes. Then we better start walking. The hollow wastes lived up to their name. A vast, wind-scoured expanse of ice dunes and jagged frost spires, where visibility dropped to arm's length within minutes. Joran navigated by memory and the faint glow of his wrist compass. Leary, despite her exhaustion, kept pace, her small frame surprisingly resilient. She chattered about her mother, how Silva could make flowers bloom in ice using harmonic frequencies, how she sang Krillian lullabies that made glaciers hum back. She says love isn't about species, Leary said once, as they sheltered behind a frost ridge. It's about resonance, when 2 hearts vibrate at the same frequency. Joran smiled faintly. She always did talk in metaphors. You match her frequency, Leary said solemnly. He didn't answer, but that night, as they huddled under thermal foil near a geothermal vent, he played his harmonica, soft, slow notes that curled into the air like smoke. Leary fell asleep instantly, her head on his knee. By the 3rd day, they reached the edge of the shatter drifts, a labyrinth of shifting ice plates that groaned and cracked without warning. According to Leary, the treaty wing lay just beyond, buried in the heart of the oldest glacier. But the Enclave was waiting. A patrol of 4 armored hunters blocked the narrow pass ahead, their breath steaming through filtration masks, pulse rifles trained on the pair. Their leader, a tall Krillian with scarred cheeks and eyes like flint, stepped forward. Corporal Vex, he said in accented but precise standard. You harbor a fugitive. Surrender her, and your sentence will be lenient. Joran shielded Leary with his body. She's not a fugitive. She's a child. She is the daughter of Silva of the Hollows, the hunter said coldly. A traitor who consorts with offworlders. The Ice-Ward Enclave does not permit such contamination. Contamination. Joran's voice rose. She's a scientist. She's trying to bridge your people and mine. Bridges burn, the hunter said, especially when built on lies. Before Joran could retort, Leary slipped from behind him. My mom didn't lie. She loves him, and he loves her. The hunter scoffed. Humans do not love Krillians. They use us, study us, leave us. Joran's jaw tightened. He remembered Earth Command's classified briefings, how they'd wanted samples of Krillian DNA, how they'd pushed for surveillance in the Hollows under the guise of alliance. He'd refused those orders, But the hunter didn't know that. What if I prove it? Joran said suddenly. The hunter tilted his head. Prove what? That I love her. That this isn't politics. It's real. Silence. Wind howled. Impossible, the hunter finally said. Love cannot be proven. It can, Joran said, heart pounding. By action. He knelt and opened his pack. From it, he pulled the harmonica, and the pendant Leary had dropped. He held them both out. My name is Joran Vex, he said, voice steady. I am human, and I choose Silva of the Hollows. Not for alliance, not for science, but because when I'm with her, the silence doesn't hurt anymore. He placed the pendant in Leary's hand, then played a single, clear note on the harmonica, the opening tone of the Krillian bonding chant, a melody Silva had once hummed to him during a quiet evening in the outpost. The hunters froze. Even the wind seemed to pause, because that chant was sacred, reserved for betrothals, for unions recognized by the eldest ice singers. You know the chant? The lead hunter whispered. I learned it, Joran said. For her. Leary, eyes shining, began to sing. Not the full chant, but the child's verse, the one that asks the ice to witness. Her voice, small but pure, echoed off the glacier walls. The hunter lowered his rifle. She is already claimed, he murmured. By law, we cannot take her. He turned to his squad. Fall back. Report to the High Warden. Tell him. The resonance has been spoken. And just like that, they vanished into the storm. Joran and Leary stood alone in the pass, breathless. She'll be in the core chamber, Leary said, tugging his hand. That's where they take prisoners before judgment. They ran. The treaty wing was a ruin of crystalline architecture, half swallowed by time and ice. But deep within its heart pulsed the core chamber, a spherical room where geothermal heat met ancient Krillian tech, walls lined with glowing veins of bioluminescent moss. And there, bound in shimmering restraints that dimmed her light, stood Silva. She looked thinner, her green skin dull, her white hair matted. But her eyes, still golden, still fierce, locked onto Joran the moment he entered. Leary! She cried, straining against her bonds. You came back. Then she saw Joran. Her breath caught. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Joran walked forward, ignoring the guards stationed at the chamber doors. Your daughter asked me a question, he said, and I finally gave her the right answer. Silva stared. What question? He turned to Leary. Tell her. Leary stepped forward, clutching the pendant. I asked him to marry you, Mom. Silva's eyes filled with tears. Joran, you can't mean. I do, he said. I've always done. I was just too scared to say it. One of the guards stirred. This is irregular. The warden must approve. The chant was spoken in the shatter drifts, Joran said firmly, by both human and child of the hollows. The ice bore witness. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Krillian law was older than their weapons, and it honored resonance above decree. Before they could react, the chamber trembled. Not from an earthquake, but from something worse. Alarms blared throughout the glacier. The walls flickered red. A voice, harsh and metallic, boomed from hidden speakers. All units. Off-world warship detected in upper atmosphere. Unknown origin. Likely hostile. Seal all chambers. Joran's blood ran cold. Earth Command wouldn't send a ship without notice. And the Concorde had no vessels this far out. Leary clutched his leg. Who is it? Silva's face paled. The Void Scourge. Joran frowned. What? A splinter faction, Silva said quickly, straining against her restraints. Radicals who believe Krylos should purge all off-world influence. They've been raiding border colonies. If they breach the core, they'll kill everyone, Joran finished. He turned to the guards. Release her. Now. The lead guard hesitated. But another explosion rocked the glacier. And this time, ice rained from the ceiling. Do it, the guard growled. The restraints hissed open. Silva stumbled into Joran's arms. For a heartbeat, they just held each other. Green and pale, alien and human, surrounded by chaos. Then she pulled back. The core holds the planet's harmonic stabilizer. If they overload it, the entire ice sheet collapses. Millions will die. We stop them, Joran said. How? Leary asked. Silva's eyes lit with determination. There's a resonance override in the lower vault, but it requires 2 operators, 1 Krillian, 1 human, to sync the frequencies. Joran grinned. Guess we're getting married faster than planned. They raced through collapsing corridors, dodging falling ice and panicked Krillians. The scourge had already breached the upper levels, black-armored warriors wielding plasma cutters and hate-filled chants. Joran used his stun pistol sparingly, more to distract than harm. Silva knew hidden passages, shortcuts carved by her ancestors. Lyri ran ahead, small but fearless, guiding them with uncanny instinct. They reached the lower vault just as the Scourge's warship began its descent, its shadow swallowing the glacier. Inside the vault, 2 crystalline consoles pulsed with soft light. One green, one blue. Human to blue, Silva said, pressing her hands to the green console. Krillian to green. Joran placed his hands on the blue one. What do I do? Feel, she said. Not push, not force. Feel the planet's song. And match it. He closed his eyes. First nothing. Then a vibration. Deep, ancient, steady. The heartbeat of Krylos. He focused, breathed, remembered Silva's voice explaining starlight like music. Remembered Lyri's laugh in the snow. Remembered the silence that no longer hurt. His console glowed brighter. Silva's did too. Above, the warship fired, a searing beam aimed at the core. But the vault hummed. The beam shattered against an invisible shield, a harmonic barrier woven from resonance, from choice, from love that dared to cross ice and species. The Scourge ship recoiled, systems failing, forced into retreat by the very planet it sought to destroy. Silence returned. Exhausted, Joran slumped against the console. Silva caught him. Lyri threw her arms around them both. In the days that followed, the Ice Ward Enclave convened an emergency council. The warden himself, a stoic elder with eyes like frozen lakes, listened as Lyri recounted their journey, as Joran explained his choice, as Silva presented evidence of the Scourge's true intentions. And when the warden rose, he did not speak of law or tradition. He spoke of resonance. The ice has spoken, he declared. The human and the scientist are bonded by more than words. They are bonded by action, by sacrifice, by the frequency of their hearts. He turned to Joran. You may stay on Krylos, not as a soldier, but as kin. Joran looked at Silva, then at Lyri, who beamed up at him like he'd hung the stars. And for the first time in years, in that snowy, silent world, he felt like he belonged. Their wedding wasn't grand. No fleets, no speeches. Just the 3 of them in the core chamber, surrounded by glowing moss and the soft hum of the planet. The warden sang the full chant. Lyri placed the spiral pendant around Silva's neck and Joran's wrist. And when they kissed, green and pale, warm against the cold, it wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new frequency, one that echoed not just through ice, but across stars. Weeks passed, and life in the high hollows settled into a fragile rhythm. Joran, once an outsider draped in the stiff uniform of Earth's military, now wore layered tunics woven from frost spider silk, their silver threads catching the ambient glow of the cavern walls. He lived with Silva and Lyri in a modest dwelling carved into the heart of the geothermal ridge, a home warmed not just by the planet's core, but by something quieter, deeper. Still, the peace felt borrowed, like a breath held too long. The first twist came on the morning of the twin moons' convergence, when the twin satellites of Krylos aligned and cast double shadows across the ice plains. A delegation from Earth Command arrived, not with warships, but with a single diplomatic cruiser bearing the insignia of the Unified Terran Accord. Their message was crisp, coded, and cold. Corporal Joranvex is hereby recalled under Article 12 of the Interstellar Service Accord. Refusal constitutes desertion. Joran read the transmission in silence, his hands steady but his throat tight. He didn't show it to Silva, not at first. But Lyri, ever watchful, saw the way he lingered by the communications spire long after curfew. His shoulders hunched like a man bracing for impact. "You're leaving," she said one night, appearing beside him like a ghost in her night wrap. Joran startled. "No, you're thinking about it." He sighed. "It's not that simple, Lyri." "But it is," she insisted, her golden eyes burning. "You said you'd stay. You sang the chant. The ice heard you." "I know," he murmured. "But Earth, they own my contract, my body, my name. They don't own your heart," she whispered fiercely. Then softer, "Do they?" Before he could answer, Silva appeared at the archway, her white hair loose, her expression unreadable. She'd heard everything. The next day, Silva summoned the warden. What followed was a closed session in the Chamber of Echoes, a vault where truths could not be hidden, for the walls themselves resonated with emotional frequencies. Silva argued that Joran's bond to Krylos transcended terrestrial law. The warden countered that Earth might retaliate, citing treaty violations. But then Joran stepped forward and did something no human had ever done before. He offered his neural imprint to the Krillian memory weave, a sacred archive that stored the emotional essence of their people. "If I am truly part of your world," he said, "then let the ice remember me, not as a soldier, but as a father, a husband, a resonant soul." The warden studied him for a long moment, then nodded. The ceremony was excruciating, needles of harmonic crystal piercing Joran's temples, drawing not blood but memory, emotion, frequency. He relived his loneliness on Theta 9, his first smile at Lyri's stubbornness, the warmth of Silva's hand in his during the Scourge attack. When it was over, he collapsed into Silva's arms, trembling but whole. Earth Command received a formal Krillian edict. Joran Vex has been integrated into the resonant kin. His service to humanity is concluded by planetary accord. Any attempt to extract him will be interpreted as an act of cultural aggression. There was no reply, but the tension didn't vanish. It merely burrowed deeper. The second twist arrived not from the stars, but from within. Lyri began having nightmares. Not ordinary ones, visions. She'd wake screaming about shadows in the core, and the hum turning sharp. At first, Silva dismissed them as trauma residue. But then the geothermal vents started flickering. The moss lights dimmed. Even the ice beneath their feet grew restless, groaning at odd intervals. Joran, now trained in basic Krillian sensing, noticed it too. "The planet's frequency is off," he told Silva one evening as they watched Lyri sleep. "Like a song with a missing note." Silva's face darkened. The Scourge didn't just attack the core. They planted something. They consulted the warden, who reluctantly admitted that fragments of Scourge tech had been found embedded in the lower vault. Biocrystalline parasites designed to destabilize Krylos's harmonic field over time. If left unchecked, the entire ice sheet would fracture within a year. Millions would perish. "There's only one way to remove them," the warden said grimly. "A resonance purge. But it requires a triad, mother, child, and bonded human." Singing the Kael'vora, the song of unmaking. Lyri's eyes widened. "But I don't know it." "You will," Silva said, her voice firm. "We'll teach you." For weeks, they trained in the Silent Grotto, a chamber shielded from all external frequencies. Silva taught Lyri the ancient verses, her voice weaving through scales no human throat could replicate. Joran, unable to sing the notes, learned to feel them, to anchor the harmony with his human steadiness, his emotional constancy. He wasn't the voice, but the vessel. During one session, Lyri faltered mid-verse, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm not strong enough," she sobbed. "What if I break the song?" Joran knelt before her. "You're not alone, Lyri. That's the whole point. The song isn't yours to carry by yourself. It's ours." She looked up at him, then at Silva. And in that moment, something shifted, not just between them, but in the very air. The grotto's walls shimmered, responding to their unity. The day of the purge, the entire high hollows gathered in silence above the core chamber. The warden stood watch. The Scourge remnants, sensing the ritual, launched a final desperate assault. But Krillian defenders, now united behind the humankin bond, held them back with shields of harmonic force. Below, the triad stood at the 3 points of a glowing triangle. Silva began, her voice rising like steam from a vent. Lyri joined, her tone clear and trembling but true. Joran closed his eyes and pushed. Not with sound, but with intent, with love, with every memory of snow walks and shared rations and bedtime stories told in broken standard. The chamber shook. The parasites shrieked, a sound like shattering glass, and dissolved into harmless light. Krylos sighed, its frequency restored, deeper and richer than before. Afterward, exhausted but radiant, the three of them collapsed together in a heap of limbs and laughter. Lyri hugged Joran so tightly he couldn't breathe, and Silva kissed his forehead with a tenderness that said more than words ever could. But the third twist was already stirring in the dark. A month later, while cataloging old treaty records, Joran stumbled upon a sealed file, classified even to Krillian archivists. It bore the seal of the First Contact Initiative, and his own father's name. His hands shook as he decrypted it. The file revealed that decades ago, during the earliest human probes into the Andromeda Reach, a small scout vessel, piloted by Commander Railvex, had crash-landed on Krylos. The official report claimed no survivors. But the Krillian logs told a different story. A lone human was rescued by a young ice singer and stayed, for years, long enough to father a child. Joran's blood ran cold. He confronted the warden, who, after a heavy silence, confirmed it. Your father lived among us. He loved a Krillian woman. She died giving birth to a daughter. Joran's mind reeled. Do you know who she is? The warden looked toward the upper galleries. She was given to the ice ward to be raised in anonymity, to protect her from Earth's reach and from the shame of mixed blood. Where is she now? The warden met his eyes. She leads the Scourge. The name hit like an ice axe to the chest. Vela, Joran's half-sister, the woman who tried to destroy Krylos, was trying to erase the very world that had sheltered her father and abandoned her. He told Silva and Leary that night, his voice raw. Leary listened in stunned silence. Silva held his hand, her grip fierce. You can't fight her, Silva said. Not with weapons. I don't want to, Joran replied. I want to understand. So they devised a plan not of war but of witness. Using the memory weave, Joran retrieved his father's last recorded resonance. A fragment of song, a lullaby he'd sung to his Krillian lover. It was fragile, nearly lost, but Silva was able to restore it. Then, during the next planetary alignment, they broadcast it not as a weapon but as an offering. A memory, a plea. Deep in the Scourge's hidden fortress beneath the frozen maw, Vela heard it. She froze. For the first time in decades, the sharp edges of her rage softened. She didn't surrender, but she ceased her attacks. And one night, under the twin moons, she appeared at the edge of the high hollows. Alone, unarmed, cloaked in black ice weave. Joran went to meet her. They stood in the snow, brother and sister, human and Krillian, strangers bound by blood and loss. You have her eyes, Vela said finally, her voice like cracking permafrost. Yours are like his, Joran replied. Silence stretched. Then, slowly, she reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, worn harmonica. Rusted, dented, but unmistakable. He gave this to me before he died, she whispered. Said it held Earth's song. Joran's breath caught. He pulled out his own harmonica, the one he'd played for Leary in the wastes. They were identical. Tears welled in Vela's eyes. All my life, I thought I was alone. You're not, Joran said gently. You have a niece. And a brother. Back in the hollows, Leary watched from the ridge, Silva beside her. When Vela took Joran's hand and walked toward them, Leary didn't run. She stepped forward, her golden eyes wide but unafraid. Are you my aunt? She asked. Vela knelt, trembling. If you'll have me. Leary hugged her without hesitation. In the moons that followed, the Scourge disbanded. Vela, no longer a warrior but a seeker, began learning the old songs she'd been denied. Joran taught her human stories. Silva shared her research. And Leary, ever the bridge, made sure no one ate alone. The bond between them deepened not through grand gestures, but through small ones. Shared meals in the warm light of moss lanterns, lessons in language and laughter, nights spent listening to the ice sing its ancient, healing song. Joran never wore a uniform again, but he found a new kind of service, not to a flag but to a family, not to a mission but to a melody only they could hear. And on Krylos, where snow never melted and stars blinked like promises, a human, 2 Krillians, and the ghost of a harmonica built something rare, a home that hummed. Years folded into each other like layers of glacier ice. Dense, luminous, and full of hidden music. The high hollows, once a place of rigid tradition and cautious silence, began to change. Not all at once, and not without resistance, but steadily, like a thaw that knows its time. At the heart of that quiet revolution stood a home carved into the geothermal ridge, its walls glowing softly with living moss, its hearth always warm, its laughter echoing through crystal archways. Joran never returned to Earth. Not because he couldn't, but because he no longer needed to. Earth had been a place of duty, of solitude, of waiting for something he couldn't name. Krylos had given him a name, not just as a bonded human, not just as a father, but as Joran of the Twin Moons, a title bestowed by the Warden after the Harmonic Accord was signed between the Hollows and the Terran Accord, a historic treaty that recognized mixkin families as legitimate under both human and Krillian law. The credit, everyone knew, belonged to the unlikely family who had dared to love across the ice. Silva resumed her work, but no longer alone in sterile labs. She founded the Resonance Institute, a collaborative center where human and Krillian scientists studied symbiotic technologies, energy systems that sang, healing frequencies that mended bone and spirit alike, and even terraforming techniques that allowed delicate earth flowers to bloom in Krillian ice gardens. Students came from both worlds, drawn by her gentle brilliance and the quiet authority of a woman who had faced exile for love and emerged not broken, but radiant. Lyri grew like a sapling in spring, tall, quick-witted, and fearless. She inherited her mother's mind and her father's stubborn kindness, along with a voice that could coax warmth from the coldest stone. By the age of 12, she was already teaching younger children the old chants, weaving in human lullabies Joran had taught her. She never forgot her journey through the Shatter Drifts, and every year, on the anniversary of her arrival at Theta 9, she and Joran would walk the same path. Not as fugitives, but as pilgrims, leaving small tokens of gratitude for the ice that had sheltered them. Vela, once the shadow that threatened to swallow their world, became its unexpected guardian. She never fully shed her sharp edges. Some wounds don't heal cleanly, but she channeled her fire into protecting the fragile peace. She trained a new order of peacekeepers, the Ice Ward Sentinels, who carried no weapons, only resonance rods that could calm riots with harmonic pulses. She lived in a small dwelling near Joran's home, and every evening, without fail, she joined them for supper. At first, she ate in silence, watching the easy way Lyri leaned against Joran's shoulder or how Silva's hand would find his beneath the table. Over time, her silence softened into stories, of her father's last days, of the loneliness that had hardened into rage, and, eventually, of the quiet joy she found in teaching Lyri to play the harmonica. One winter solstice, during the Festival of Echoes, a celebration where every family shared their story aloud so the ice might remember, the four of them stood together in the central plaza. Lyri, now 15, stepped onto the resonance platform and began to sing. Not the chants of old, but a new song, one she had written herself. It told of a human alone in the snow, a green-skinned girl with white hair walking through blizzards, a scientist who loved across stars, and an ant who learned to forgive. The ice beneath the plaza shimmered in response, reflecting the twin moons in rippling gold and silver. When she finished, the crowd stood in silence, then erupted into a roar of applause that echoed through the caverns for hours. Later that night, back in their home, Joran sat by the hearth, Silva beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. Vela played a soft tune on her harmonica, and Lyri braided frost flowers into her aunt's hair. "You know," Joran said quietly, "I used to think happiness was something you found at the end of a mission, a reward for surviving." Silva smiled, her golden eyes catching the firelight. "And now I know it's something you build," he said, looking around at his family. One day, one choice, one shared meal at a time. Outside, the snow fell gently over Krylos, eternal, silent, and beautiful. But inside the home on the ridge, there was no silence. Only the hum of love, the murmur of stories, the laughter of a girl who had once cried in a frozen tent and now sang to stars. And in that harmony, human and Krillian, past and future, loss and hope, they found not just peace, but something even rarer, a forever that felt like home. Years later, the ice still remembered their song. Joran's hands, once calloused from soldiering, now coaxed vegetables from frost-resistant soil in their sunless garden. Silva's research bloomed into schools where human and Krillian children learned side by side, their laughter echoing through crystal halls. Lyri, ever the bridge, became the youngest ever appointed harmony speaker, her voice weaving unity where division once festered. Vela, no longer a shadow but a steady flame, taught resilience not through blades, but through stories sung over shared meals. Their home, once a refuge, became a beacon, a place where difference was not tolerated, but cherished. On quiet nights, they still gathered by the hearth, harmonicas playing duets beneath the twin moons. No war came, no exile called, only the slow, sweet rhythm of ordinary days stitched together by love.